There's an old adage in football that says, if you can't gain a yard, you don't deserve to win a game. And for the Pittsburgh Steelers on Saturday night, that might have set the tone in a 19-17 loss against the Cincinnati Bengals. Welcome to the Steeler Postgame Show the day after here on Oneberg, sponsored by Shenderovich and Fishman. I am your host, Ed Troop. The Pittsburgh Steelers lose their fourth straight game Saturday night to the Cincinnati Bengals to wrap up the 2024 regular season in Week 18. And here's a date for you, December 8th. Remember that? Just about a month ago. That was the last time the Pittsburgh Steelers won a football game in which they beat the Cleveland Browns at Acrisure Stadium 27-14. Since then, it has not been pretty. Losses at Philadelphia 27-13. The loss at Baltimore 34-17. The Chiefs on Christmas Day 29-10. And then last night, 19-17 against the Cincinnati Bengals. A four-game losing streak in which the Steelers have been outscored 109-57. Their offense in that time only averaging 14 points per game, defensively giving up 27 points per game. And here's a key stat for you. 6 costly turnovers by the Steelers offense in this four-game losing streak at key situations and key times that have led them to these losses. The defense has produced 5 turnovers, but they haven't been able to capitalize on that on the offensive end en route to these 4 straight losses. Last night at Acrisure Stadium, Joe Burrow throws for 277 yards and a touchdown. The Bengals were just 4-8 a month ago, but 7 of those losses were by 8 points or less. So the Bengals knew that they were close in a lot of early football games in the season. After the Steelers beat them in Cincinnati, they were 4-8. They had to put together a win streak to try to get into the playoffs, and they have done that. 5 straight wins now to wrap up the regular season. They will wait this afternoon to see if the Patrick Mahomes-less, there you go, Kansas City Chiefs, they're going to rest Mahomes and a lot of other stars this afternoon in Denver. If they can get the Chiefs to beat Denver on the road at Denver and then the Jets to somehow win at home against the Miami Dolphins, then they will be the 7th seed in the AFC. But everybody in Cincinnati watching to see what happens this afternoon there. Meanwhile, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they're looking most likely at the 6th seed in the AFC, in which they will travel to Baltimore next weekend in a wild card game. The Steelers could be the 5th seed and travel to the AFC South champion Houston Texans if the Chargers would lose at Las Vegas this afternoon. That game also at 4:05 this afternoon. The Chargers, if they win, the Steelers will be the 6th seed, and then they will definitely visit the Baltimore Ravens next weekend. So that's the game in which Steeler Nation will be watching here in just a little bit. It's the Chargers at Vegas. And again, if the Chargers win, the Steelers will be the 6th seed. They will head to Baltimore next weekend. But if the Raiders beat the Chargers at home, then the Steelers would go to Houston. And I'm sure most Steeler fans are more comfortable with going to Houston next weekend rather than go to Baltimore. But at this point, after these 4 straight losses, they could be going to Jacksonville, and that might not matter for the Steelers. The Bengals, again, on this big tear, came into Acrisure Stadium having won 4 straight. They get their 5th straight win. Joe Burrow completed 37 of 46 passes, including a 12-yard touchdown to Jamar Chase on the opening first half possession in which the Cincinnati Bengals had a 7-0 lead. They never looked back. Chase finishes the game with 10 receptions for 96 yards. He's close to the NFL's triple crown. That would be catches, yards, and touchdowns. And right now, he's the leader in all 3 categories. And if things finish up at the end of tonight, the way that Chase and Bengal fans won, he could become a triple crown leader in the NFL with catches, yards, and touchdowns. Again, a big night last night, 10 catches for 96 yards and a touchdown. Cincinnati rushed the Steelers, outpassed the Steelers in total yards. They held the Steelers to 193 yards, more than 300 yards less than the Steelers rolled up 520 back during their first meeting in Cincinnati. So defensively, Cincinnati responded with a good game plan. Trey Hendrickson had 3.5 sacks last night against Russell Wilson. Hendrickson is now leading the NFL with 17.5 sacks on the season. And once again, last night was a big impact as he kept Russell Wilson and the Steelers offense on the run most of the night. Wilson had 148 yards and a touchdown, but most of that came in junk time towards the end of this game in the fourth quarter. Pat Freiermuth had a pretty big game, 19-yard touchdown reception. We're going to get to the scoring summary in just a little bit. Chris Boswell hit a 54-yard field goal late in this game to pull the Steelers within 2 at 19-17. The Steelers had a chance late in this game in the fourth quarter. They got the ball back just after the 2-minute warning, but they never made it past midfield. It all came down to a 4th down, incomplete pass in which Russell Wilson was trying to hit Pat Freiermuth across the middle to keep the drive alive and keep the game going, but it was incomplete. Cincinnati took over, took a couple knees, and go on to the 19-17 victory. And again, Cincinnati now 9-8 on the season, their 5th straight win after a 4-8 record after the Steelers beat them earlier this year. The Steelers 10-7 now, 4 straight losses, as I mentioned. And, they are definitely reeling going into the playoffs, and I don't think anybody is confident about this team right now going into the postseason, whether they're the 6th seed, the 5th seed, whatever. Whether you go to Houston or go to Baltimore, the Steelers are going to have to turn things around in a hurry. And based on what we've seen these last 4 games, I don't think many of us are optimistic about what next weekend is going to look like for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's go through the scoring summary. Again, Jamar Chase, a 12-yard touchdown pass from Joe Burrow in the first quarter with 9:49 left. Opening drive touchdown. They went right down the field. Cincinnati looked good. The Steelers' first offensive series, they go 3 and out. The Bengals get the football back, and it leads to a field goal by Cade York from 48 yards out, and the Bengals led 10-0 at the end of the first quarter. The Steelers put together their first and only touchdown drive of the first half, in which Najee Harris caps it with a 1-yard touchdown run to make it 10-7 with 9:54 left in the second quarter. And then the Steelers, they play takeaway. Bishop gets that big interception off of Burrow late in the second quarter, but the Steelers can't capitalize on it, and it ultimately leads to a 3rd and short call in which the Steelers try to get the first down via run. That doesn't happen. Russell Wilson tries to sneak it, get it across. That doesn't happen on the 3rd down play. And then on the 4th down play, they try to run the ball. I should say on the 3rd down play, it was Russell Wilson trying to sneak it for the first down. He was short. It was reviewed and said he was short. And then on the 4th down play, they try to run Warren. And again, both of those plays, the officials gave the Steelers the first down, but both of those plays, instant replay assists, they take a look at it and rule both times that they're a half a yard short. And the Steelers give the ball back to the Cincinnati Bengals at midfield. But the Steelers defense responds. They hold them to a field goal, and it was 13-7, a 6-point game at halftime. Only one score to talk of during the third quarter. York makes another field goal from 35 yards out to give the Bengals a 16-7 lead. And then a field goal to start the fourth quarter with 11:02 left in the fourth quarter to make it 19-7. The Steelers defense, again, after that opening drive in which Jamar Chase capped it off with that big touchdown reception, they held the Bengals and Joe Burrow to field goals the rest of the way. They got good pressure on them. The defense actually played pretty well in this game throughout after that opening drive. It was the Steelers offense, though, that struggled and struggled big time throughout. They do get a touchdown, as I said earlier, the Pat Freiermuth 19-yard touchdown reception from Russ Wilson to make it 19-14 with 8:07 left. And then the Steelers cut it to 2. Russell Wilson, again, puts together a decent drive for the Steelers. It leads to a Chris Boswell 54-yard field goal to make it 19-17 with 2:39 left. The Steelers defense responds. They get the ball back just under 2 minutes, but then the incomplete pass on fourth down to Pat Freiermuth across the middle ends this game and puts the Steelers in a 4-game losing streak now to end the regular season here in Week 18. And, you know, if you take a look at the AFC North right now, the Cincinnati Bengals probably are the better, right? The better of these two teams and probably deserve that playoff spot the way they've played with these last 5 games and the way the Steelers have played these last 4 games. You can make the argument that they do not deserve that playoff spot. But the Steelers at 10-3 put themselves in a good spot earlier this season. The Bengals did not at 4-8. And ultimately, the Steelers clinched that playoff berth after that 10-3 start, and were okay throughout these remaining games to lose them and still make the playoffs. But do they deserve it? Probably not. The way the Cincinnati Bengals have played throughout these last 5 games, they're probably the better of the two teams and deserve that last spot. But we'll have to wait and see how that plays out for Cincinnati. We do know the Bengals need help to get into the postseason. We do know the Steelers do not. They are in the postseason. They are either the 5th or 6th seed, depending on what happens with the Chargers at the Las Vegas Raiders this afternoon. Again, if the Chargers win that game, then the Steelers will go to Baltimore. If the Raiders happen to beat the Chargers this afternoon, then the Steelers will head to the Houston Texans, who are the AFC South champions in the AFC. Let's take a look a little bit at some scoring statistics as well in this Week 18 loss. 19-17, the Steelers lose to the Bengals. Glad you could join us here on the Shenderovich and Fishman Steeler postgame show the day after. I am your host, Ed Troop. Glad you could join us here on Oneberg. Joe Burrow completes 37 of 46 passes for 277 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. It was actually forced out of the pocket many times. The Steelers got good pressure on Burrow after that opening drive and sacked him 4 times, in which once he actually went out with an injury late in this game, but did come back. The Steelers get 4 sacks on Burrow on the afternoon. Rushing-wise, Chase Brown, their talented running back, he was out due to injury from last week. So they have Herbert in there, the backup running back. He has 20 carries for 69 yards, and Joe Burrow just had 1 scramble for negative yards. So the Steelers hold the Cincinnati rushing game to only 68 yards. But from a passing standpoint, Jamar Chase, again, a big day, 10 catches, 96 yards and a touchdown. Their big tight end, Mike Gesicki, 8 catches, 68 yards in this game. T. Higgins, 4 catches for 53 yards. Higgins goes out late in this game with an injury. And a lot of people are speculating that in the offseason, the Steelers are going to go after T. Higgins as a possible wide receiver to come here to Pittsburgh. Higgins and Chase, both their contracts are up here in the offseason, so Cincinnati has a big decision to make. They're going to have to pay Chase. Most likely they cannot afford both those guys, so Higgins probably will become a free agent. And he could be a guy that the Steelers could try to get in here in the offseason. We'll have to wait and see. But Higgins, 4 catches, 53 yards in this game. Cincinnati defensively, again, big game by Hendrickson. Trey Hendrickson has the 3.5 sacks. As a team, they had 4 sacks. They got a lot of pressure on Russell Wilson. The Steelers' offensive line struggled at times in this football game, and it showed. And Russell Wilson, again, very gun-shy to try to throw an interception. He's gotten burnt the last few weeks throwing interceptions, but in this game, held onto the ball a lot and took the sack quite a few times, but he doesn't throw any interceptions. Russell Wilson, 17 of 31 for 148 yards, a touchdown, and no interceptions. Russell Wilson did, again, get sacked throughout this football game 4 times under a lot of pressure, doesn't turn the ball over. Najee Harris, 12 carries for only 36 yards. Jaylen Warren, 6 rushes for 21 yards. Russell Wilson, 4 keepers for 16 yards. As a team, the Steelers rushed for 74 yards in this loss. Receiving-wise, your tight end, Pat Freiermuth, your leading receiver, 8 catches for 85 yards. Mike Williams had that big catch for 25 yards in the first half that kept the drive going. Beautiful catch, kept both of his feet in bounds. Harris out of the backfield, 4 catches for 20 yards. Van Jefferson, 3 catches for 18 yards. The Steelers, 148 yards receiving in this loss. As far as the Steelers defensively goes, 4 sacks on the night. Patrick Queen, Benton with that big sack. You had Preston Smith with a sack, and Nick Herbig with a sack as well for the black and gold. TJ Watt got good pressure in this game, not an official sack on paper, but good pressure on Joe Burrow throughout the night. He got free a couple times. Beanie Bishop, the big interception for the Steelers as well. But again, the Steelers lose this game 19-17. It's the day after. We welcome your comments here on Oneberg, the Steelers' 4th straight loss. What do you think going into the playoffs next weekend? Will the Steelers be able to turn things around in a wild card game? They've not won a playoff game since 2016. I don't think Steeler Nation is very optimistic at this point after these 4 straight losses if they will be able to turn things around and turn things around in a hurry in this game. Let's go over a few other notes in this game. Again, the Bengals set the tone on that opening drive. The defense had no pressure on Burrow early on. He goes to Jamar Chase for that opening touchdown drive, and that set the tone. Wilson, again, can't hold on to the ball very long because the offensive line could not protect. Turnovers killed the Steelers again for the 4th straight game. Beanie Bishop, that key interception of Burrow. And again, the Steelers were only down 6 points at halftime, 13-7. But again, the offense just could not produce a lot of points. Again, this 4-game losing streak, they've scored 13 against the Eagles, 17 against the Ravens, only 10 points against the Chiefs, and only 17 last night against the Bengals. In that 4-game losing streak, the offense averaging 14 points per game. But defensively, they've given up some big numbers until last night. They held the Bengals to 19, and that's saying a lot for Joe Burrow. This offense has been on fire. They've really put up a lot of big numbers the last few weeks. And the first time the Steelers played them in Cincinnati, Burrow and this offense put up a lot of points. The only difference was the Steelers offense responded with a lot of points and again over 500 yards in that win at Cincinnati earlier this year. But defensively, 27 against the Eagles, giving up 34 against the Ravens, 29 against the Chiefs. They do hold the Bengals to 19 last night offensively, averaging 27 points per game given up so far during this 4-game losing streak for the black and gold. The offensive line, a lot of big question marks. They've been banged up. They did play fairly well throughout most of the season, but during this 4-game losing streak, they have not played well. A lot of major question marks around the quarterback position play of Russell Wilson as well. Again, not a lot of time, but also holding on to that football a lot of key turnovers during this 4-game stretch. It leads you to think in the offseason, a lot of questions. Wilson and Fields, their contracts are up. What do you do there? I was hoping that they would bring Justin Fields into this game last night to try to give this offense a spark. Fields was banged up the last couple of weeks, but he was a go. He was in uniform last night, and we never saw him once, especially in those short yardage situations. So I'm not sure if he's just not 100% healthy, and that's why they kept Justin Fields on the sideline. But you got to question, why not bring in Fields, especially in some of these short yardage situations, and use his athleticism to try to give your offense a spark? They never went to Fields, and Russell Wilson could not give them that spark until it was too little, too late in the fourth quarter. George Pickens, how about that? He was held in check once again, and he seemed like he has not only been held in check, but he has checked out. Several drop passes last night, very uncharacteristic. Just didn't look like he was very motivated in this football game, and he struggled, and hence the Steelers' offense struggled. George Pickens, a lot of question marks around him as well. And you got to think Najee Harris is probably gone in the offseason. He will become a free agent, and he has shown signs throughout this year of running hard, but again, statistically, not putting up huge numbers, only 30-some yards rushing last night for the Steelers, 36 yards to be exact on 12 carries. He did have that touchdown for the Steelers in the first half. And again, the Steelers defense banged up a lot on that first drive with Burrow banging them up, taking them straight down the football field and scoring that touchdown. But they were able to come back and get pressure on Burrow and get themselves back into the game. But again, 27, 34, 29 points given up during this 4-game losing streak, 19 last night to the Bengals. Not a lot of splash plays during this losing streak as well. They got the big interception last night by Beanie Bishop. But you got to have some question marks there as well. Cornerback, opposite side of Joey Porter Jr., Jackson was not able to go again last night due to injury. They had Tyson there at the other corner position, the big, tall Corey Trice at the cornerback position trying to make plays, but he struggled at times as well last night. Joey Porter Jr., a much better game last night than he's had the last few weeks. So some questions for the Steelers as they go into this wild card game next weekend. You got to get better quarterback play out of Russell Wilson, right? And again, this offense has shown sparks at times throughout the season, but these last 4 games during this losing streak, they have not. And they have shown at times that they have a very average quarterback right now under center. The offensive line has had their struggles as well. When you take a look at the George Pickens and the rest of the wide receivers, there's no key number 2 receiver. We talked about that. No running game. A lot of question marks, a lot of holes in which the Steelers are going to have to address and address quickly if they want to try to get their first playoff victory since 2016. How about that? This team has not, of course, won a playoff game since the 2016 season. That's going on 9 years, folks. And I said it all season long, going back to training camp at Latrobe. Everybody was talking Super Bowl and number 1 seed when they were 10-3 halfway through the season. I kept saying, the key for this team is they win a playoff game. They have not done that since 2016. Just win 1 playoff game. They have not been able to do that. Right now, it looks like their backs are up against the wall going into next week, and maybe they'll surprise us. We'll have to wait and see. But right now, not looking very strong for the Steelers going into next weekend in that wild card game. You are listening and watching the Shenderovich Steeler postgame show the day after here on Oneberg. I am your host, Ed Troop. Let's finish up the postgame show with some statistics, some team stats for you. First downs last night, Cincinnati 21 first downs to the Steelers 16. Third down efficiency, 5 of 13 for the Cincinnati Bengals. So the Steelers defense does a pretty good job of getting the Bengals off the field there. The Steelers offense struggled on third downs again, 4 of 12 last night. Total yards, 314 for the Bengals. A lot of that coming on the opening first couple of drives. The Steelers only 193 total offensive yards. And again, we don't want to go back to the days of Matt Canada and Kenny Pickett, but my goodness, this Arthur Smith, Russell Wilson offense during this 4-game losing streak feels a lot like that, a lot what we saw the last couple years for the Steelers on the offensive side. Team passing yardage, 246 total passing yards for the Cincinnati Bengals, only 68 yards rushing last night. The Steelers, 74 yards rushing and 119 yards total passing. Penalty-wise, not too bad for the black and gold. 3 penalties for 20 yards, 6 for 25 yards for the Cincinnati Bengals. So only 9 total penalties between these two teams last night. And time of possession, 38 minutes for the Cincinnati Bengals and only 22 minutes for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Steelers pretty much lose every category when it comes to team stats last night. And as I've said all season long, when you lose these key categories, you're probably going to lose the football game. When you win those categories, you win the football game. So the Steelers are 10-7. Where do they go from here? It'll either be a trip to Houston if the LA Chargers lose this afternoon to the LA Raiders. But if the Chargers beat the Raiders, then the Steelers will be the number 6 seed heading to the Baltimore Ravens next weekend to play them in a wild card game, a third matchup against the Ravens. And that's probably your most likely scenario. We'll have to wait and see how these games play out here this afternoon to see where the Steelers go. And again, the Cincinnati Bengals, they need help. They're watching this afternoon as well here at 4 o'clock to see what happens in the games in which they need a Jets win at home against the Miami Dolphins and a Kansas City Chiefs win on the road at the Denver Broncos. If those two scenarios happen, then the Bengals are the number 7 seed and they are in to the NFL playoffs. That's going to do it for the post-game show here on Oneberg. We're glad you could join us. We welcome your comments all week long. Brian will be joining me later this week. Stay tuned for a playoff preview show in which we'll preview the Steelers and their opponent next weekend in that wild card round. Again, it'll either be a trip to Houston or a trip to Baltimore for the Steelers. We will preview that here later this week right here on Oneberg, so make sure you tune in for that and keep those comments coming. Have a great Sunday afternoon. Again, your final score last night is the Cincinnati Bengals win their 5th straight game. The Steelers lose their 4th straight game. Final score 19-17. This has been the Oneberg postgame show, sponsored by Shenderovich and Fishman right here on Oneberg. Have a great night, everyone.